time. Former President Trump fueling speculation over a vice presidential pick after name-dropping some high-profile Republican figures over the weekend. Our next guest has a few suggestions for her former boss, as she did back in 2016, writing in a New York Times opinion piece out today. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, former senior advisor to President Trump and a Fox News contributor. So here's what you wrote in part in your New York Times op-ed. You said, quote, "Politics is the art of addition, not subtraction, let alone distraction. A qualified running mate who attracts rather than alienates core constituencies, is ready to lead on day one, and who can find his or her way in front of a TV camera without becoming the headline is preferred." So who fits that bill?
Well, many people. I think President Trump has a lot of runway when it comes to choosing his running mate. He is probably the nominee for a challenger, the earliest that we've had ever or in quite a while. And he has, I think, an embarrassment of riches. And speaking of rich embarrassments, no one seems less popular than Kamala Harris. So Joe Biden is stuck with her. That NBC News poll that was devastating to Biden, John, over the weekend was even more devastating to Kamala Harris. She seems less popular than anyone. So I feel almost anyone that President Trump is considering and would consider as a serious running mate can absolutely beat Kamala Harris in a debate and show America that life with Trump before policy prescriptions, particularly before the COVID pandemic, and then with his new running mate, would be much better than Biden-Harris. So, look, on the foreign policy crisis and chaos, he's got Secretary Pompeo, Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton. I think that Tim Scott checks a lot of the boxes, somebody who dropped out of the race and is actively campaigning for President Trump, but who will eat into this notion that the Democrats have a lock on African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, union households. Senator Scott is very articulate when it comes to the issue of abortion. He seems to be able to explain how the other side is extreme and what it means to be pro-life in 2024. And this pick a woman theory, I think all the women I mentioned are friends and allies of mine, and he can go young and experienced, accomplished, like Katie Britt, senator from Alabama, first-term Senator Sarah Huckabee Sanders, our old friend and the governor of Arkansas. Of course, Elise Stefanik, I think, is actively auditioning for the role of VP. She's number 4 in the House. But then, of course, he's got Joni Ernst or Marsha Blackburn. He's got Governor Kristi Noem, who he did name check to Fox News' Maria Bartiromo over the weekend.
Well,
I am a huge advocate right now.
I was just going to say that he mentioned Kristi Noem over the weekend as one of the people that potentially he could pick, saying that she's been a terrific ally of his, that she acknowledged that she couldn't beat him in an election, and that's why she'd never run for the job. Although you would think that a terrific ally would say, I would never want to run against the person I think should be president. But here's what you wrote about this idea that you've got to match Kamala Harris with a woman. You said, the most popular suggesting I'm hearing is that Mr. Trump do as Mr. Biden did 4 years earlier and, quote, pick a woman as his running mate. But Mr. Biden and the country suffer daily the consequences of embracing identity politics. Now, a lot of people think that, woman against woman for vice president would be a great way for the president to offset that potential advantage the Democrats have and set up 2028, naturally, if he wins the presidency, to have the first woman president and it be a Republican.
Well, two things there, John. Like I said, all the women I've mentioned in the piece and beyond are very capable and would do a much better job than Biden or Harris, no question. But this pick a woman theory, I think is limited because Donald Trump in 2016, when I was his campaign manager, he beat the queen bee herself. Hillary Clinton was about to be the first woman president of the United States of America. And we beat her while a majority of the voters were women. Not unlike 8 years earlier when Senator Obama beat Mitt Romney, first African-American president, a majority of the voters were white. So this whole idea that people vote just according to their race or their gender or their socioeconomic status or their union household, I think Republicans and particularly conservatives need to stand athwart against that. And look, women, to their credit, they don't vote on their gender so much as their vision and their values. Women have comprise a majority of the electorate. Indeed, women in this country have been electing our president since 1964. And so we've had plenty of Republican presidents during that. If I were giving the president advice right now, I would tell President Trump to pick a person of color. So that's Senator Rubio, Senator Scott. I know Byron Donalds is a favorite, the congressman, about 45 years old from the Naples area, Florida, on TV regularly, a big favorite in the House. And I tell you, the Trump World Insider favorite right now in President Trump's ear about him is Dr. Ben Carson, former world-renowned pediatric neurosurgeon and former Trump opponent in 2016, and then a member of the cabinet for all 4 years. Vivek Ramaswamy, very popular pick on social media. I don't think you take two significant outsiders, though, and make a ticket out of that. But Trump, this is Donald Trump. He'll keep us guessing, and his quote, short list will be very long.
Well, you're the one who suggested Mike Pence to him, and that helped him with evangelicals. So we'll see if he takes your advice again. Kellyanne, always great to spend time with you. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.